Our next speaker, I'm pleased to say there's actually been a manager in the room who's been doing some monitoring and collecting the data and has a story to tell, which is actually very hard for a manager to do and work into everything else that they got going on. So I'm very proud of this guy. Jeff McEnroe is a fisheries biologist with the BLM, and he's going to tell you about the Rock Creek post-fire restoration monitoring that he's been doing. So help me welcome him up to the stage.
Hi, everybody. As Cheryl mentioned, my name is Jeff McEnroe. I'm a fish biologist with the Roseburg BLM. I'm excited to be in Corvallis here at my alma mater, getting to talk about this restoration project. There's a few things that I kind of take for granted in the COVID world, and that's the fact that it's really easy to give a Zoom presentation. You don't have things like nerves or having to change out of your board shorts and wear jeans, that kind of thing. So bear with me on a few of these slides. I'm going to talk about a post-fire restoration and monitoring project we did in Rock Creek, which is a tributary to the North Umpqua. It's a partnership effort between the Partnership for the Umpqua Rivers, USGS, National Aquatic Monitoring Center, and the BLM. So the focal area of this project is the Archie Creek fire. It was one of the many catastrophic wildfires that happened after Labor Day in 2020 that have been mentioned multiple times, but the Archie Creek fire is our footprint. I was out there, took that picture on the first day of the fire, and I spent the next 6 weeks on the fire as a resource advisor, so I became pretty intimate with it. Maybe. Okay, just a few images to kind of set context of the fire severity. This is our one of our day use areas right on the North Umpqua. This is looking down into Rock Creek through the Taylor Creek drainage, basically 100% tree mortality. This is where the North Umpqua complex of 2017 and Archie Creek fire overlapped, so you have an even higher burn severity in this area. This is looking down at the North Umpqua River. This is a tributary of Rock Creek, East Fork Rock Creek. What we found in the Rock Creek watershed was about 70% of the watershed had a high severity burn and nearly 100% tree mortality. This is moving lower down in Rock Creek. This is right near, up from the mouth a couple miles. Thing to notice in this photo is that old growth stand in the background that was 250 plus years old that had 100% mortality as well. So I'm trying to get at with these pictures, and this image here is that this was what I call a catastrophic wildfire. It wasn't a mosaic burn. Nearly 100,000 acres had high severity or 90+% tree mortality. So this, looking at the old growth stands that were consumed, this is really like a once in centuries disturbance event, which was what really the driver behind a lot of the restoration and monitoring that we wanted to do in Rock Creek. So let's zoom into Rock Creek. It's a tributary to the North Umpqua, about 62,000 acres. It's right in the center of the Archie Creek fire. Like I said, about 70% of the watershed was consumed in the fire. And it's that classic Western Oregon checkerboard BLM private industrial land ownership pattern. One thing I want to emphasize about Rock Creek is that it's a fairly unique watershed in the North Umpqua. Most of the tributaries to the North Umpqua tend to be higher gradient, constrained type systems. Rock Creek historically was it is an unconstrained alluvial system, but historically it had large floodplains, lots of side channels, low gradient. So, in other words, it's actually got some of the best potential salmonid habitat in the North Umpqua. List of species that are in Rock Creek. There's a diverse assemblage of salmonids. We have spring Chinook salmon, coho salmon, summer and winter steelhead, 3 forms of cutthroat trout, and Pacific lamprey. So why do we even need to do restoration in Rock Creek? What's the driver to that? I think This isn't a surprise to most people in the room, but Rock Creek had a very abusive past. We cleaned it of all its wood, we bulldozed it, and we cleared out all the riparian vegetation. And this happened over and over again. Just a few photos. This is a mill that was actually in the watershed at the current Mill Pond BLM campground. So it had a mill like right in the middle of the watershed during the 50s. Here's some gentlemen strapping some cables to yard out a large log jam. Whoops. A bulldozer bulldozing out a large log jam in Rock Creek. And the result is something that looks like it came out of a World War II photo. So what is the legacy on the landscape from all of those impacts? And really what's happened is the stream is downcut 5 to 8 feet. It's disconnected from its floodplains and side channels. There's very little spawning gravel due to the higher energy of the system, fewer pools, and almost no woody debris in the system. So even though the vegetation has grown back, the legacy of those past impacts are still present in the watershed. So since this is only a 20-minute talk, I'm going to fast forward about 2 years through a whole bunch of fundraising, restoration design, permitting, NEPA, and then some implementation. Basically, we came in quickly after the fire and were able to implement a large-scale restoration project in the Rock Creek watershed. We utilized what's called the natural channel design concept. This is design restoration method developed by Brian Baer with the Enterprise team, and it's really based on where wood naturally accumulates in reference systems such as like the Queets River or Washington. Part of the restoration effort involved, since we had some old growth trees to utilize, we were able to make these large channel spanning structures. We called them kind of legacy logjam structures. We designed 18 of them and to capture wood in safe locations away from infrastructure and where wood would naturally accumulate, kind of planning for that woody input into the system. So just a few photos of the project, kind of just to give you a little slideshow. This is a 1,200 foot long side channel that we opened back up, added woody debris to, basically made it fish Disneyland. This is the core of some of those legacy log jams. You bury some logs in, Brian calls them Joe pokes, and that's kind of that core that holds that woody material in place. This is excavation of a floodplain pool that's going to function as both beaver and juvenile coho habitat. Wood was very abundant for this project. I guess one of the benefits of a catastrophic wildfire is we had as many trees with root wads that we could handle. The trick was getting them before they were cut down as hazard trees, which I could talk about at a different time. Finally, this is one of those legacy logjam structures on the left side of the photo, and we actually last summer started excavating some pools because they weren't developing as quickly as we had hoped. So the end result of these efforts was the largest post-fire restoration effort in BLM history. We were able to place 1,400 trees in 6.1 miles of stream and floodplain. We opened up over 10,000 feet of side channels and built 18 of those large legacy logjam structures I was talking about. And then we also excavated 87 complex pools in the main stem and side channels. So with a catastrophic wildfire, we have a large restoration project and we're implementing new restoration techniques, at least in the Umpqua. We absolutely had to do some kind of effectiveness monitoring. But add into that, BLM aquatic staffing was at an all-time low. So it makes it very difficult. And one of the curses of being a land manager is you're spread very thin and that it's very difficult to do monitoring. It's hard to find funding for it. It's hard to find the time for it. It's hard even to do the analysis for it. So, but we got very creative with some of our monitoring. We utilized, well, that's when one of our partners stepped up, the Partnership for the Umpqua Rivers. they really stepped up to help out. They hired a full-time technician to help with the monitoring, and they also did a partnership effort with the National Aquatic Monitoring Center to accomplish a project I'm going to talk about in a second. And then we also kind of got creative with asking help for other BLM districts to come in and help out with some of the snorkel surveys I'm going to talk about. So the first thing I want to mention on the monitoring was, I feel like is a pretty huge key piece to it, and that's BLM hydrologists and USGS staff worked in April of 2021 to get a real-time water quality and flow gauge put in at the bottom of Rock Creek. So even if we do nothing else, this is collecting data full-time for us. So, and it's also, it took a lot of effort in the front end and some expense, but it's an incredibly useful tool that helps all the other monitoring efforts we're doing. One of the really cool monitoring aspects that developed was, like I mentioned before, the Watershed Council teamed up with Utah State University and the National Aquatic Monitoring Center, and they developed a macroinvertebrate and water quality study. This is a 5-year study looking at water quality impacts of catastrophic wildfires, changes to macroinvertebrate communities, and the effectiveness of post-fire restoration efforts. Started collecting data in the spring after the Archie Creek fire. They had identified 15 sites. 5 sites were burned without any restoration that took place in the Rock Creek watershed. 5 sites were burned with restoration implemented, and 5 sites were actually in an adjacent watershed in Canton Creek and were considered unburned. The sites are sampled once per year from May to October, and the parameters collected are on the biological side, macroinvertebrates, organic matter, and epilithin. And physiochemical data is a variety of water chemistry variables, temperature, substrate size, and canopy cover are collected at each site. Still too preliminary to have any results from the study, but I thought I'd throw a couple pictures in of people collecting data. This is collecting the macroinvertebrates at one of the burned restored sites. And here's collecting some macroinvertebrates at the unburned site in Canton Creek. All right, so as a fish biologist, I had to include some kind of fish monitoring in the project, and we're always getting questions from the public on, well, how many fish is this producing? So we attempted to maybe answer that question, and like I talked about before, we asked for help from other districts, and we got 8 to 10 fish biologists from the BLM to come for a 3-day camp out in Rock Creek each summer and snorkel 8,000 meters of stream. We decided we want to snorkel the entire restoration reach, go big or go home. And so we did that in 2021, which was the summer after the fire, and in 2022, this last summer, which was post the first summer's restoration efforts. So this next summer will be post all of the restoration. Counted juvenile coho, chinook, steelhead, cutthroat trout, and we also counted adults too. Just a few notes about the snorkel surveys I want to highlight is that we made an effort to collect this data in GIS. So every habitat unit was snorkeled and GPSed, and so you can look at this data at a variety of scales from the habitat unit all the way up to the reach or watershed type scale. So there's many treatment versus control options depending on which scale you look at it. And finally, this was snorkeled by professional fish biologists with many years experience, not necessarily volunteers. Some real quick graphs to show you. I apologize for my 3rd grade quality graphs. As a land manager, you kind of lose your skills in Excel. So anyway, if somebody wants to help me make some better graphs, I'd appreciate it. But one of the benefits of this restoration, kind of a side benefit, is you also get some habitat data. So we're counting the number of pools. So prior to restoration, we had 63 pools in that 8,000 meter reach. And post-restoration, we had 149 pools, so 2.5 times more pools. Here's a look at just the preliminary coho data. We jumped up 2.45 times number of juvenile coho in the reach post-restoration. Adult cutthroat jumped up 4 times in the reach post-restoration. And yeah, we just count adult cutthroat, not young of the year trout. We don't find a lot of juvenile Chinook in Rock Creek, but we did have them, the numbers jump quite a bit, 18 times. I think that's due to water quality issues in the watershed, so hopefully as conditions improve, we'll see more and more juvenile Chinook staying in the watershed. And then we really don't see any change in juvenile steelhead, but we don't count young of the year trout, so that's kind of expected. If we see a change, it'll be this summer. A few notes, as I mentioned before, this is very preliminary data. We're going to need longer term data sets to determine any kind of trend. And then a few missing components to this that I think we can sub in as like adult escapement. We have the Winchester Dam, which counts all of the adult salmonids over it every year, so we can use that as kind of a measure of what's coming into Rock Creek. And then we're also doing spawning surveys. I just don't have that data put together in the watershed. And then this data just shows the boost from 2021 restoration. We haven't seen that boost from 2022 yet. The other one would be control reaches. The graphs I showed you are that 10,000 foot level, the entire reach. And so as we zoom in, like I said before, we can pan out control versus treatment reaches. The final thing I want to talk about was some thermal and orthographic imagery that we had done in the watershed. This was to look at, we really didn't understand hyperetic flow pathways in an alluvial watershed. We didn't understand if post-fire restoration would improve cold water refugia in the watershed. We wanted to kind of understand some of that stuff, so we were actually able to pay NV5 to do these flights for us. So we flew over 11 miles of Rock Creek and its tributaries, collected thermal imagery, orthographic imagery, and bathymetric LiDAR the first year. We didn't collect it in 2022. We weren't able to get a pre-fire flight. We couldn't predict when the fire was, so we got the flight in summer of 2021. Some of the interesting things we captured with that flight, though, was it was the first summer post-catastrophic wildfire. It was the hottest summer on record, and it was also a 25-year drought. The second year, in 2022, we got the exact opposite side. We had like the wettest spring in 20 years, and so you look at the thermal images of the 2 years, and it's hot and fairly cool, and so we're hoping maybe this summer will be normal. I don't know. But we're planning flights in 2023 and 2024. We have funding for that, and hopefully we'll keep going with this. It's a really cool thing to geek out on. Real quick, get you on the color ramp. Purple, the fish are happy. Orange, the fish are stressed. Yellow, the fish are dead. And so here's a quick image. I got a few quick images to show you, and then I'm done. This is the mouth of McComas Creek. You can see the area in purple there, that's cold water refugia. Here's that same orthographic image. And then here's a photo I took during the heat dome of that same location, mouth of McComas Creek. That's about 70 Chinook salmon holding in about 2 feet of water, which they don't normally do. And it was 78 degrees or 26 degrees at the stream gauge downstream of that at the time of that photo. So I feel like without that cold water refugia, those adult Chinook would have perished. So this time we'll see if you can identify where the cold water refugia is in here. And there's some kind of subsurface flow or spring popping out right there. And so these images just give us areas to investigate on the ground. We haven't really fully taken advantage of them yet, but we hope to. And then finally, this braided channel section of Rock Creek potentially shows some subsurface flow there, popping out as cooler water in the side channel. There's an image of the orthographic image of that spot too. So with that, I want to just say we kind of threw this out there. A lot of it's very preliminary. We just want to let folks know that these data sets were out there in case anybody wanted to collaborate or had maybe a grad student they wanted to throw in to help analyze some of this stuff. And so with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Can you summarize the advantages from a broad perspective to restoration in a post-fire environment? I'm thinking if there was any differences funding-wise, permitting-wise, and then obviously hydraulically. What are the advantages that you saw doing this project in a post-severe fire environment compared to an unburned environment?
Gosh, that's a tough question. The number one that jumps to my head is the amount of materials we had to do the restoration. Normally we would have had to get a lot of wildlife clearances on the trees. We're able to just utilize whatever was in the riparian zones that was going to be felled as hazard trees anyway. So that was a huge, huge plus. I can't say we really noticed any benefit post-fire with like flows or anything like that, and funding-wise, we honestly didn't really get much funding like post-fire recovery money with this either. We had some prior to the project. We were actually planning a project in Rock Creek prior to that, so we had some and we're able to utilize kind of that funding to go after more. I think maybe we had an advantage, on grant applications too, as far as, we're trying to recover this now so we can capture that post-fire wood and substrate that's going to come through the system versus coming in 5 or 6 years and potentially that stuff is gone. So the urgency is real. It's just we were very lucky in the fact that we already had some funding to do this restoration with. Hope that answered your question. No, great question. We actually had the U.S. Forest RATS team come in and assess it for the restoration potential. That's some of the things I couldn't talk about because the talk was short, but the short answer is we looked at this for like 2 years before the fire and tried to decide on what restoration method to use. The Forest Service team came in and looked at it. Rock Creek was too far down cut, and we didn't have any material to add to Rock Creek, and so stage 0 was not an option, and the checkerboard ownership kept us from doing stage 0 too. So their second method besides stage 0 was to go with this channel design method, and so we pursued that, and it was really just to put the wood in and then hopefully allow that material to start grading over time and eventually get there. Good.